My rich uncle died and left his $35 million estate to charity, except for a rusty toolbox he left me. My cousins mocked me, typical loser gets the junk. I took it home and noticed the bottom was unusually heavy. Inside the false bottom was a phone that immediately started ringing. The voice on the other end said, "The real inheritance begins now." Chapter 1, The Toolbox. I wasn't expecting to be in the will. Honestly, I debated whether I should even attend the funeral. Uncle Raymond had always been larger than life. The cigar-smoking, whiskey-sipping titan of the East Coast real estate world. But ever since my parents cut ties with him 20 years ago, our relationship was more postcards than phone calls. Still, when the invitation to the reading of the will arrived on heavy cream paper with gold foil trim, curiosity got the better of me. I flew into Connecticut wearing my only suit, patched elbows and all, and walked into a mahogany courtroom filled with people I hadn't seen in years. My cousins, sleek, smug, and dressed like Wall Street, sat front and center. Julian, the eldest, already smirking like the estate was his. Amelia, checking her nails. Mark, checking the stock market. I sat alone in the back row. The lawyer, a man who looked like he'd been pickled in paper contracts, began the formalities. As expected, my cousins were each handed large portfolios, homes, cars, stocks. Julian got the Long Island vineyard. Amelia received the summer home in the Hamptons. Then the lawyer paused. And to Mr. Daniel Hayes, I straightened slightly. A small glimmer of hope stirred. Maybe a check. A bond. The assistant rolled in a cart with a rusted red toolbox on top. Dented, faded, heavy. He receives the contents of this toolbox by explicit request of the deceased. The room broke into chuckles. Julian snorted. Typical, the handyman nephew gets the tools. Even the lawyer seemed confused. But I recognized that toolbox. It used to sit in Uncle Raymond's garage. I remember it from the summers I'd visit him as a boy. Before the family feud, before the letters stopped. I nodded once, picked it up, and left without a word. At home, I placed it on my kitchen table, curious but cautious. Most of the drawers were empty. A wrench, a faded photo of me at age 10. But then I noticed something. The bottom of the box wasn't level. I turned it over and saw 4 hidden screws holding a false panel. My heart kicked in my chest. Beneath the panel was a burner phone, already vibrating. I stared at it for a second. Then I answered. A voice, old, scratchy, but unmistakably Raymond's, echoed through the speaker. "If you're hearing this, Daniel, it means they won, but I didn't lose." Not really. The real inheritance begins now. Chapter 2, The Challenge. The line crackled. Uncle Raymond's voice, pre-recorded but alive with energy, continued. I knew they'd circle like vultures the moment I died. I had to make sure the only person who deserved my legacy would find it. That's you, Daniel. If you found the phone, good. Listen carefully. The voice paused, then deepened. I never trusted lawyers. That's why everything they inherited, the houses, the cars, the portfolios, it's bait, expensive distractions, the real empire I built. It's off the books, hidden, and I want you to find it. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, the weight of the phone and toolbox still in my hands. Raymond's voice returned. I've left behind 6 locations. Each one holds a clue, a piece of the puzzle. And each one is tied to a project your cousins never knew about, because they never asked, but you did. You always asked questions. I remembered those summers, me, 10 years old, asking what he was building, why he drew blueprints at night. He always said, "One day I'll show you." He was about to. The first clue is at the old mill in New Haven, the place where we fished that summer before your parents cut contact. Go there. Use the code 743 on the south wall safe. What's inside will make things very real. The recording ended. I sat in silence, heart pounding. This wasn't some sentimental scavenger hunt. It felt serious, purposeful, secretive. I checked the toolbox again. Beneath the false bottom, now open, was a folder. Inside, a set of coordinates. A handwritten list labeled assets they'll never find. and a legal document naming me the silent co-owner of an offshore holding company, Arcturus Capital Ltd. My breath caught. That company, I'd seen its name on real estate signs in Miami, Dubai, even Zurich. No one ever knew who was behind it, until now. I didn't sleep that night. I packed a small duffel, booked a rental car, and hit the road at sunrise. As the city skyline gave way to frozen forests and half-forgotten roads, I kept hearing Raymond's voice in my head. The real inheritance begins now. And I finally believed him. Next stop, New Haven, the mill, the truth. Chapter 3, The Mill and the Map. The old mill looked like it hadn't seen life in 30 years. Perched beside a frozen creek in New Haven, it leaned against time like an old man on a cane. Brittle wood, rusted gears, and flaking red paint, whispering stories no one cared to hear anymore. But I did. I parked the rental car half hidden behind a line of bare trees and stepped out into the crunch of frost. Snow fell softly, muting the world, except for the echo of my own footsteps as I pushed open the warped door. The place still smelled of sawdust and oil, the scent of my childhood. I remembered chasing Uncle Raymond through this place as a boy, yelling over the sound of machines I didn't understand. This was where he taught me how to measure twice, cut once, where he taught me that real work doesn't need an audience. Inside, the mill was dark except for the thin light slicing through broken boards overhead. I followed the wall he mentioned, the southern one, until I found a strange panel set into the stone. Faint numbers were etched beside it. I punched in 743, a soft click, a small steel drawer slid open. Inside sat two things, a rolled canvas map and a metal disc the size of a poker chip with a serial number engraved on it, nothing else. The canvas unrolled with a puff of old dust, revealing a hand-drawn map, not just of the mill, but of several properties marked with red symbols. One was the mill itself, another was a storage unit in Reno, a third was labeled only with a cryptic note, where they buried the truth. At the bottom corner of the map, in Raymond's unmistakable handwriting, was a message. They laughed because they thought wealth was gold and marble, but I built my empire from silence, loyalty, and precision. Every asset they flaunt was funded by something they never saw coming. You'll see what I mean when you reach the storage unit. Bring the disc. Suddenly, it clicked. The disc wasn't decorative, it was a biometric key, something Raymond had once shown me during a late-night whiskey talk about crypto wallets and multi-factor security. This wasn't just treasure hunting, this was unlocking a financial labyrinth. I looked back toward the drawer, half expecting more. But that was it. The map, the disc, and the question. What else did Raymond hide while everyone was watching his mansions and jets? My phone buzzed, a private number. I answered cautiously. A voice said, "You found the first location, good. But be careful, not everyone wants you to succeed, especially not them." The call ended. I froze, scanning the trees outside. Was someone watching? I carefully packed the map and disc, stepped back into the cold and locked the mill behind me. But something had changed. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was a game of survival, a race, and I had just taken the lead. Chapter 4, The Storage Unit in Reno. Reno greeted me with dry winds and wide, empty skies. I drove out past the casinos and cheap motels to a grim row of self-storage units on the edge of the desert. Unit B14, according to the map. My uncle's note had circled it in red next to one simple instruction. Use the disc, trust no one. I parked, checked my surroundings twice, and stepped up to the keypad. There was no keyhole, just a small biometric scanner with a round groove the size of a coin. I slid the metal disc into the slot. The scanner lit up, buzzed softly, and clicked open. Inside was darkness and silence, until the overhead light flickered on, revealing something that stopped me cold. It wasn't junk, it was a vault. Steel shelves lined the walls, each stacked with hard drives, ledgers, passports, gold bars, and files labeled in Uncle Raymond's tight handwriting. 1989, Zurich, 2007, London, Witness Fund, Black Ledger. At the center of the unit stood a locked military-grade safe. On top of it sat a sealed envelope addressed to me. I opened it. Inside was a short letter. If you're reading this, they've already taken the bait. Let them have the estate. Let them celebrate their fake victory. The real empire is here, clean, untraceable, and built for someone who understands the value of quiet power. Inside the safe is the command key to the offshore accounts. Every hard drive here has what they don't want the world to see, including the evidence that could bury them. Use it wisely. And underneath that, a line I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Remember, power isn't loud, it's patient. My hands trembled. This wasn't an inheritance. This was a counterattack. Every cousin who mocked me, every lawyer who called me a footnote. They had inherited noise, headlines, and tax bills, but I had inherited leverage. Just then, my phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. This time, a voice said, "They know you've reached Reno. Be ready, they're coming." A deep chill slid down my spine, because now I understood this wasn't just a treasure hunt, it was a trap, and I was the one holding the detonator. Final chapter, the real heir. The storage unit became my war room. Over the next 72 hours, I stayed in a cheap motel on the outskirts of Reno, poring over every document, every drive, every grainy photo in my uncle's hidden archive. What I discovered unraveled everything I thought I knew. Not just about Uncle Raymond's empire, but about my own family. It wasn't just wealth he was protecting. It was truth. My cousins hadn't just bullied me out of my inheritance. They had spent years feeding lies to Raymond, fabricating records, manipulating his trust, and isolating him after my father died. They forged documents to make themselves appear loyal, capable, legitimate. And it had worked, until now. In the encrypted drives was a full audit trail, offshore transactions tied to illegal real estate schemes. Insider trading, bribery, and most damning, evidence that they had siphoned millions from Raymond's companies even before his death. Hidden recordings showed boardroom meetings where my name was mocked, where they toasted, clearing out the dead weight. But Raymond had known. He'd watched in silence, played the fool, let them dig their own graves. And instead of fighting them in court, he handed them the rope. The $35 million estate was bait. Public, taxable, trackable. The real fortune, his black ledger empire worth over $120 million, spanning 5 countries, was buried in hard currency, gold, patents, and encrypted crypto portfolios, all accessible through the safe I now controlled. I was stunned. But I wasn't done. On the day of the official will reading, televised by my smug cousin Victor as a legacy moment, I walked in just as the cameras rolled. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. I walked calmly to the podium, holding nothing but an envelope. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Here to claim your rusty toolbox again." I smiled. "No, I'm here to offer you a trade." I placed the envelope on the table. Inside, printed screenshots from the drives, financial crimes, forged signatures, and a notarized affidavit signed by Raymond a year before his death, declaring his knowledge of their scheme. And stating that his true heir would not be named in the public will for his own protection. Silence rippled through the room. Victor's smirk cracked. "This is fake." That's when the door opened. 2 federal agents entered. "We've seen enough." Within a week, the estate was frozen. Within a month, indictments were filed. And within 6 months, my cousins were facing fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering charges, all broadcast on the same news channels they once bragged on. Meanwhile, I quietly took ownership of the holdings in Zurich, the crypto keys in Dubai, and the patents housed in Singapore. No headlines. No applause. Just quiet, undeniable power. Years later, when people ask how I inherited a fortune, I tell them the truth. I didn't inherit anything. I earned everything, starting with a toolbox. Because sometimes the ones they mock the most are the ones who hold the sharpest blade. And in the end, the loser they laughed at was the heir they never saw coming. Epilogue. The toolbox on display. It now sits behind glass. The same rusty, dented toolbox that once earned me nothing but laughter and pity. Now preserved inside the executive lobby of our Langston Holdings, directly beneath the founder's original blueprint sketch of the company's first mill. Visitors often pause to stare at it. Some smirk. Others ask why something so battered sits in a place of honor. My assistant smiles and recites the same line I gave her. Because that box held more than tools. It held the truth. And truth built the empire. Raymond's portrait hangs above the case. I had it repainted, not as the stoic billionaire, but as the scruffy, laughing mechanic I knew as a child, grease on his knuckles and warmth in his eyes. A man who never needed to say much to teach everything. His legacy isn't just in the wealth or the holdings. It's in what he believed about people like me. Quiet ones. Dismissed ones. The so-called failures who were never given a fair start, but who refused to stay buried. I visit the case sometimes when no one's watching. I run my hand gently over the glass. And I remember the voice on the phone that started it all. The real inheritance begins now. He was right. But what I inherited wasn't just money. It was purpose. Fire. And the chance to prove that the underdog, the mocked, the doubted, the discarded, can become the storm. And sometimes, all it takes to unleash that storm is a rusty old box. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice. And share this story with someone who needs its fire.